Do you have any questions to ask me, Anson? Is there anything
When he
you
has
want
one,
me to
you
discuss?
ask.
Well, I can ask him.
He's going to take you in another room where you can confess everything.
That would be very dramatic, wouldn't it?
And don't tell any lies. I became a janitor and got free tuition. And Virginia was a librarian. She worked for her tuition. So at the end of the day, I would sweep the library and she was still there and I talked to her. But I actually was conscious of her in the life drawing class. And I noticed that Virginia, or whoever this was here, that girl can draw. And she could. Well, in my mind. So I always put my easel just behind her so I could watch her drawing.
He always says he just saw something in her work and saw the creativity and the capability in her art that he'd seen a lot of other people doing art. You know, you look over your shoulder in art class, and he had not seen anyone whose work was that purposeful and had meaning and power.
Well, that's what brought them together, and that's what made success out of their marriage. And they have had a lot of quarrels, a lot of yowling and yelling at each other, but basically they're together forever. You know, they belong together. They're just right.
He, like Virginia, like Pat, they're all trained in drawing first. Los Angeles was the drawing center for California. And a lot of times in the United States, they always thought of Los Angeles in their generation as being artists that drew.
Graphics is my joy. I love to draw. I got into pen and ink and pencils and cross-hatching. My brother-in-law was into cartooning. My sister knew what she wanted to do as a painter. I wanted to show human emotions. I think that's the most important things we have inside of us. And it comes out in the faces of people. And people have 1,000 expressions a minute. You know, we've got a lot of moods that go through us.
Then I met Pat, her sister, which was haunted my whole life and probably improved it.
Well, he has a very sarcastic, witty tongue, which goes with what he does. And sometimes it can become quite negative, but most of the time since he was married and I was divorced and all that, he's helped me 20,000 million ways, for which I'm profoundly grateful. He's my brother-in-law, but my brother, really a brother, and I love him. I think that secretly in his heart, Eldon has always admired the fine artist. That's supposed to be superior. And Virginia has always admired the cartoonist in Eldon because she wanted to be one at one time. So they admired each other and they blended their talents together. And that was quite a marriage, you know. It's very unusual to have that happen.
I was impressed with his drawing, and he liked my drawings. We liked to see art. We would go and see art in museums, and there was a camaraderie there. And of course, he was a man and I was a woman. And
I don't believe my parents really got together so much for love as they did truly for their love of art. And then it turned into a respect for one another's art. Always that true respect. And it's, you know, in the 70s, I remember sitting down at breakfast in the morning, and even after I went off to school, they would sit there and they would talk about what his art, what he was doing in his art, and she'd look at his cartoons, and they'd discuss reasons for something, or she'd ask questions. And almost the same sort of thing occurred with her art. You know, she would come home after a very difficult day, you know, at her studio, and she'd been doing paintings, and something wasn't right, you know, just frustration in her voice. You know, what do I do about this? Or what do you think? And it was always that back and forth.
I lived with Virginia and Eldon during high school in the mid-70s.
every morning, Virginia would critique his cartoons. He was up at 4 in the morning listening to KGO, drawing,
doing his gags.
I'd put him by her breakfast plate, and I said, when you get through breakfast, if you're not doing anything, go through them, make 2 piles. Funny pile, dumb pile. We won't discuss it, but just do it. Then I'd look quietly later in the day, and I'd say, what didn't you like about this one? You know, might have been my favorite in the wrong pile.
And oh, Virginia, you don't know. God, you know, this is the way it went. His face, you know, and eyebrows, and him, what are you talking about? And all that, and Virginia with her big wide mouth, kind of like this, you know, and he's screaming at him, ah! And, you know, her voice is piercing.
I always found that kind of an event to watch. It's kind of good theater. And you look at the women that he draws and tell me they're not, you know, they are. You know who they are when you look, you know.
People always ask, do you copy your wife? And I said, no. But there's something about Virginia, her big eyes. I've told people that I never really drew Virginia, but I was drawing her before I met her in the cartoon. So when I met her, I married her. The Muslim world and Iraqi and Iranian was on my mind, especially these burqas, and then the modern Iraqi-Iranian person. So the gag, this is the way I rough it to send to Playboy or the New Yorker. This woman is talking. I think it's the freedom of thrusting your hips forward. Okay, when they okay it, I get letters like this from Hefner and Michelle Urey. I think Michelle makes kind of a preliminary cut. I think she's a dynamite editor, and it's finalized with Hugh. He usually writes on it, okay, HMH, make the girls prettier. I kind of blew that up with a Xerox, and that's it. See, this is Arsh's 300-pound paper. It's really sturdy. I marked the dimensions of the page of Playboy. I just put that there, and I traced it in light pencil. Then I can paint without having to redraw. Well, I'm always redrawing and refining, but if you got to think composition and painting and all the problems, get the composition, then you could paint with a light heart and make it work. I used to use totally Winsor Newton watercolor, but with cartoons you have to make corrections. I use acrylic now, and I still use both. The Winsor Newton has wonderful flow. You could make flows with acrylic, but the opaqueness, you can correct areas and make it look flowing. No, you can't use oil because these got to dry and you got to mail them. Sometimes yesterday. Before you get to the drawing and painting, you've got to have a gag, and it's got to be funny.